Hey everybody, I'm Curtis.
And I'm Hannah.
And this is Love at First Fright.
Do you want to play a game?
I knew you were gonna ask it.
No, I have something else.
You said, oh, no, it should be a surprise. This should be a surprise. And I said, are you going to ask me if I want to play a game? And you said, no.
There's something else.
There's something else.
No, this is what I actually want to ask you. If you had to pick one of the saw traps
okay.
to, like, endure, which one would you do? Like, which one do you think you could survive?
Out of all of them, or are we just talking about the first movie?
I mean, you can do whatever. You can just do whatever you want.
I gotta reach deep into the back of my mind to remember every saw trap I've ever witnessed.
Yeah.
I like the, what's it called? I don't actually know the name of the trap.
Okay.
But it's from I think the movie called Jigsaw.
Oh, okay.
Towards the end where the two people and there's like the shotgun or whatever, and he tells them that the key to their like salvation is in the gun or whatever, and it's all double speak and everything. And this is me going into it with knowledge of I know who Jigsaw is and how he works, right?
Sure.
So because when we watched that one, I was like, don't shoot him.
Don't do it.
It's gonna backfire. It's not gonna be good if you do that. And then it happened. So I could do that one.
You could survive that one?
I think so.
I think for me, the easiest trap to live through is probably any of them in Saw 5, but especially the one when the like explosives are rigged up in that one room and there's the tunnels that are shooting off to the side.
Oh,
and
yeah.
There's 4 tunnels and there's 4 people, but only 3 of them have keys. And for some reason they're like, well, somebody's gotta die, even though the tunnels are larger than an average New York City apartment, and all 4 of them could have fit into one if necessary.
I should have said 5. That's a good one. I forgot about all the traps in 5. You're right.
Literally any of them.
They're all designed to be survived.
They're all
by everyone
by
if they all work
teamwork.
together. Yeah.
That's fucking teamwork.
I do remember, we're not going to talk about Saw 5 extensively in this one because we didn't watch that one.
Nope.
But I do remember that scene now where the one guy goes like super aggro and starts breaking all the glass.
Yeah.
And then everyone grabs the keys and gets into the things. And then he just like gives up and stands in the middle of the room and gets blown up. And I'm like, you didn't even try to get into any one of the other tunnels.
And it would have been so easy.
Yeah.
They're so spacious.
Yeah.
And they just don't.
But
don't
that's not the
work
point
together.
of the movie. He was sick and he didn't want to be healed. You know, he failed.
He wasn't grateful for life.
He didn't learn John's message.
Yeah. Honestly, Jigsaw is a self-help guru.
In a way.
In a way.
If you listen to Dr. Gordon, he's technically not a murderer.
I know, right?
Which is, I mean, maybe technically true.
No.
I mean,
technically, he is a murderer.
Well, is he a murderer, or would he be, you know, like, what's the one where you put people in knowingly dangerous situations?
Like manslaughter?
Something like that. Yeah, like, that's what I mean, is like, on a technicality, he's not a murderer.
I don't think that's true. Because I feel like if I'm in a situation where I have rigged up a shotgun to a door handle, and when you turn the door handle and open it, the shotgun's gonna shoot you. Yeah. Like, nobody's like, oh, that guy killed himself.
You left out the part where I did give you a cryptic hint about don't open the door.
Yeah. When God closes a door, he opens a window.
Exactly. So, and not a murderer.
Yeah, not a murderer.
Checkmate. He's off scot-free. They got nothing on him.
I love that that's a recurring theme throughout the Saw franchise, where people are like, well, he's not technically a murderer. Yeah. And I'm like, okay.
No, I think it's silly. That is a point of it, that it's everyone, not everyone, a lot of the people, is that he's technically not a murderer. they can see like the good in what he does. He has like this moral code. The moral code thing is more of like outside the movies, I think, but I hear a lot of people talk about that, and I'm just like,
yeah,
you're not watching the same movie.
No. I mean, maybe for the first couple, you could make an argument that there's some rhyme or reason.
I would say no, and we'll get into it.
But it quickly just anything.
I would say even in the first one, you can't even.
I would agree.
That reasoning is out the window. Yeah. We'll get into it.
Yeah, because we are talking about the first
Saw.
Saw 1.
Saw.
Just called Saw.
We seen Saw.
See saw fly.
we seed, we saw, and we conquered.
I think we're having a collective stroke.
I'm not. I'm great.
Yes, the original Saw came out in 2004. It was directed by James Wan, who, of course, went on to become, honestly, like one of the most...
Well, we've already done a James Wan movie on the show. We did the first episode we did was The Conjuring.
Yeah, he's a real... I mean, I feel like at this point he's more or less a household name.
Yep.
So,
I think most recently he's done the newest Aquaman movie, which I have heard pretty mixed to negative things about, but I'm
not the audience for it.
I also think we're just like superhero kind of fatigue at this point.
Yeah, there's been too many.
Anyway, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, but he directed this, and his partner in the film was Leigh Whannell. Leigh Whannell wrote the screenplay, but it was based off of like a short film that Whannell and Wan wrote together.
Yeah, I learned that several months ago when we were gearing up to go watch Saw X, and I got like deep into the Saw lore, and I read that, and I was like, that's cool.
Yeah. So, written by Leigh Whannell and also starring Leigh Whannell. He plays the character Adam. But yeah, there's a couple of big names in this movie, actually, which I feel like is semi-rare for a horror movie.
Yeah, I think so, particularly because, like, with horror movies, a lot of actors and actresses get their start in horror, and then they pretty quickly leave the genre. Like, if they find like any measure of success,
unless they get locked in,
right? Well, and that does happen. Like Jamie Lee Curtis is, a scream queen.
Yeah, I mean, she did other stuff.
She did do other stuff, but I'm saying like she's really well known in horror, and she doesn't like turn away from it. I think it is kind of a cool thing to have the first of a horror franchise,
right?
And it has some pretty big names attached to it.
Yeah, obviously Cary Elwes, very, very famous. Loved him since I saw Princess Bride for the first time. What a treat!
It's hard reconciling that's the same actor sometimes.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I'll think about it and I'm like,
no,
come on. Not from that kind of goofy, charming movie to this. You're doing this? which is not a knock against him. I love it. Yeah, it's great. Anyway.
And also Danny Glover.
Yeah.
Which I guess it's not as out of left field in terms of his career, because he's done some action, kind of adjacent stuff. But obviously a big actor, and to start at the first Saw movie, which was probably a big gamble from two Australian directors and writers that hadn't really made their name yet. So like these days, signing on to a James Wan movie wouldn't be a risk.
No, I don't think so. I think he's established himself with successful franchises and titles and stuff like this. So if he wants you for a project,
right,
you're probably pretty secure in the fact that it's going to be well received, at least in like, if we're talking horror, horror community, right?
Yeah. So I mean, there's other people in the movie. Of course, Tobin Bell is in this one, though he's not in this one as much as some of the future Saw movies. Shawnee Smith is also in this one. This is when we first meet Amanda. So if you've seen any of the other movies, she's an OG. She's been here since the beginning. Obviously, it was the start of a massively successful and beloved franchise. And also a lot of people sort of I think when people think about the horror term torture porn,
yeah,
this movie is often what people kind of trace that back to.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think, at least for the first Saw, and that's not to say that there wasn't gore and there wasn't torture, there absolutely was.
Sure.
But it wasn't when I think of the term torture porn, like what that brings up for me is something that's a lot more graphic and intense than anything we see in the first Saw movie.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's Saw 3 where they have, I think it's called The Rack.
Oh, God.
The one where the
I knew that's what you were going to say.
Well, yeah. I mean, Saw 3 is miles.
Way gorier.
Yeah.
Way crazier.
It's way more over the top. And so, yeah, no, I mean, like, I understand. I think it's because, like, when Saw came out, there wasn't really like, a movie like it.
Yeah.
That had, like, come out before. So I understand people tracing it back to that. But if you compare it to, like, any of the other Saw movies, man, Saw is like it's pretty weak stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also because, you know, it came out in 2004 and then just the next year after that is when we got Hostel.
Oh, that's
and
fair.
So I think there was just a period of time in the early 2000s where like this is what horror was.
Yeah. No, that's...
And I think Saw just happened to be one of the first entries, so it gets associated with it, even though I don't know that for the first Saw movie that's super accurate.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because watching it more recently, like I had first seen this movie years and years and years ago. But I've watched it a few times in more recent years, and it honestly kind of comes across more as like a psychological crime thriller than like a horror movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know that you would categorize this as just like horror, really.
Like, and I fully acknowledge there are horror elements. I'm not trying to say, you know, it's not really a horror movie, but
we're turning up. Actually.
But I mean, I just think it has a different vibe from a lot of horror movies. You know, there's kind of a whodunit element. There's a mystery to it. You're trying to figure out all this wordplay and these puzzles, and you know, it's like there's like character drama of like trying to get into like the backstories of all these people and why they do what they do in a way that just feels different. It's not like a slasher.
Yeah, there's not like a guy with an axe coming after him. There's not some supernatural ghost thing possessing people or killing people.
And it feels different from even something like Hostel, which people kind of associate it with because of that mystery element to it.
Yeah.
That Hostel doesn't really have.
No, Hostel has like I think a little bit of it in like figuring out like what's going on kind of a thing, but it's not really like a whodunit so much.
No, it's just like a how do we get out of this?
And then at a certain point Hostel definitely turns it up to 11 with the gore and, you know, a lot of the more torture porn aspects of those kinds of movies. Anyway, so
the basic plot summary, if it's been a while and you need a refresher, is that two men, Adam and... Two guys.
This summer.
Adam and Dr. Gordon, played by Leigh Whannell and Cary Elwes, respectively. They wake up in a, you know, dirty bathroom, chained to some pipes. No idea how they got there.
Yep.
And quickly realize that they are being held captive and they are playing some kind of sick game of the person who put them there.
Yep.
And the framing of all of this is that they have a time limit where Dr. Gordon's game is to kill Adam before the time is up. And Adam's game is, I guess, just don't get killed.
It's just kind of hang out.
Just sort of be
just
around.
Vibe, I guess.
Yeah. And the consequence is not only their own lives, but Dr. Gordon's family has also been held captive. So if he doesn't comply, the consequence for him will be that his family is killed.
Yes.
So, you know, that's the main story, but we're kind of getting a lot of setup throughout this film about Jigsaw and who he is. So we're getting some of the detective side of the people investigating these crimes. We're getting one of the survivors of the traps, Amanda, and her perspective on it. So there's some back and forth and some, you know, different timelines and things going on simultaneously to try to figure out this mystery of who is Jigsaw, why is he doing this, and how do we get it out.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of moving pieces in this one that, like, explaining it linearly. That, there we go. Oh my god. Linearly.
You have 30 seconds to say linearly.
Spell linearly.
Or else I'll gouge your eyes out.
Just do it. Just do it.
Just take me out.
L-I-N-E?
Game over.
No! Explaining it all in chronological order.
Yeah.
I found a loophole.
There we go. Look at you.
Would be a Herculean task.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, as you watch the movie, you don't know all of the parts.
Yes.
A lot of it you are finding out as the characters are finding out. There's actually some really cool cinematography that happens in this to kind of show the point of view of the characters at different times. But a lot of the information that you get is through basically exposition that they're telling and seeing kind of how they got to this point.
Right.
And all the answers are there.
Yes.
But one of the best things about Saw, when we first did a watch through, was it last year?
I think it was like last year. We watched all of the movies
that
were out.
Every single one of them.
Except for Saw X.
Yeah, because it wasn't out yet. And then we went and watched Saw X when it did come out. But we did a whole big watch through. And we started out with this, and I think we were like, Saw's pretty good.
Yeah.
And then it kind of just like went down, and it was a roller coaster, and then it got like good again.
Yeah.
Because by the end of it, you and I were so hyped for the ending thing that they do in every Saw movie.
The ending montage.
Where they do a montage where they recontextualize everything in the movie to like show you how all of it fit together, and it was there the whole time kind of a thing. And when we first did this watch through, we were so frustrated because we were like, the last 15 minutes of every Saw movie is just them going back over the movie we just watched.
But putting it in the chronological order.
Yeah. But now, man, I live for it. It's so good. I live
for it.
But yeah, the one of the best parts of the movie is the end when, you know, it recontextualizes all of this and it puts it back in order. But it does go to show that they actually do a mystery where you can kind of solve it.
Yeah, you definitely
before the end, which I think is really cool, and also a lot of mystery movies don't do.
Yeah. And they even give some red herrings, you know, because one character I only briefly mentioned, the detective that Danny Glover plays, Detective Tapp.
Yep.
I always want to say Trap, and it's Tapp.
It's Tapp, yeah.
I'm
the same.
I stumble over it all the time.
Yep.
But he's the one who's like taken a real special interest in this Jigsaw case, and you kind of learn throughout the movie that he's like been kicked off the force because he got too obsessed over it, and you know all that stuff. But seeing things through his perspective where he's trying to put all the pieces together, and there's even a point where the movie kind of suggests maybe Detective Tapp is behind all this because he suspected Dr. Gordon was Jigsaw, so now he's putting who he thinks is Jigsaw through his own Jigsaw game, and you're like, whoa, my brain's bleeding. But of course that is not the outcome of it, but they do all these little, you know.
The movie, after a certain point, it just becomes like twist reveal, straight into twist reveal, straight into twist reveal. You are constantly just like whiplash, and, this guy, that guy.
The whole time they're like, you actually thought it was Tapp, you fucking idiot.
Fucking idiot.
Let me tell you why you're an idiot. Yep. But I mean, these movies rule.
No, they're so much fun.
I honestly don't know why some people don't like them. I get for some people there's if you don't like a lot of the, you know, blood and guts kind of stuff.
Oh, sure. The blood and guts is perfectly.
Probably this wouldn't be a good, you know, movie for you. But I think sometimes people just take it a little bit too seriously.
Yeah.
And I don't think, like, I have so much more fun with Saw when I just embrace
if you kind of just kind of like let go when you get in there, and oh my god, it's a fun ride.
Jigsaw, take the wheel. Like, you just gotta let go and experience the trap in real time.
Yep.
And just have fun with it.
Yep.
And yes, because we are how we are, I will relentlessly pick apart all of the plot holes afterwards, but that's part of the fun too.
Yes.
And, you know, it's like I've done that to death with this first one of like Adam's whole thing where he doesn't really even have a role to play in this.
There's so much. Let's like kind of get into it a little bit, because there's scenes in this where I think we can dismantle the whole like he's actually like morally gray and he has like a mission and it. Shut up, because he doesn't, and I can prove it in this movie.
He doesn't need to.
No, he doesn't need to.
Well, and it's one thing I know we said we wanted to get into it, but one quick thing I wanted to drop in here is that Leigh Whannell has said that his inspiration behind this movie was he had his own kind of scary medical experience where he like had to go through a battery of tests to rule out that he had some kind of brain tumor.
Oh.
And I mean, he didn't, but it was still scary in the moment before he knew that. And he talked about how he was sort of having this thought in his head of like, you know, if they tell you, hey, you've got a tumor, you've got cancer, whatever it is, they say, no, they say, you know, oh, you have a year to live, make the most of it. And he was like, what would happen if the same doctor said that to a serial killer? Like, how would a serial killer make the most of it with their year to live or their 6 weeks to live or whatever? And so I think even like Wan and Whannell acknowledge that like, while he's a complex character, he's not a good guy.
No.
You know?
I distinctly remember there being so much conversation
there still is.
About people being like, oh, he, you know, I mean, it's
like
just
Batman.
like, Dr.
No,
Gordon being like, he's technically not a murderer. Yes, he is.
He's killed.
Anyway.
He's responsible for so many deaths.
Yeah. So anyway, Jigsaw orchestrates this whole thing, and there is so much backstory as to why he's doing this and how we even get to this game that isn't revealed until way later in other movies. So we can't get into all of it. We'll be here for 8 hours talking about all of this.
I feel pretty confident that we're gonna work our way through this franchise.
We absolutely are.
So we're gonna keep it just to what they show us in this movie, and I know for some people who have seen the franchise, you're going to think, oh, but Hannah, you're leaving out important context.
You're leaving out the most important part.
But the issue is they didn't give us that context.
Yeah, so we have to take it for what it is.
So we're taking it as it is.
Yeah, so he orchestrates this game, and this isn't the first game that he has put together. No. We find that out through Detective Tapp and company investigating the murders after Dr. Gordon and Adam, yes. Wake up and they start talking about it, and Dr. Gordon kind of like is like, oh, I think I know who's doing this, and then they get into it, and we get some of these other traps. There's a guy who has to crawl through some razor wire because he was cutting himself. And in order to show that he actually wanted to live, he had to cut
himself some more, I guess. I don't know.
Climb through some razor wire, and then there was another one, which is one of the first points we're going to bring up. We're going to come back to this. There's a man who's covered in flammable jelly, locked in a dark room with one candle. The floor is covered in glass, and he has to get these numbers off of a wall that are covered in numbers.
It's literally floor to ceiling numbers.
And he has to put in a code.
Combinations in here.
Yeah, without dropping the candle on himself and burning himself alive.
All that because he's a malingerer who like called in sick or something.
Then we have Amanda's trap, which is the iconic reverse bear trap, which
I think everybody knows.
It's weirdly iconic. It doesn't kill anybody until way later in another movie.
Yeah, and I mean maybe it became iconic because she was like, you know, the sole survivor up to that point.
I guess that's true. But yeah, so we have those 3 traps that get revealed to us, and then the context of this being they're in one of Jigsaw's trap, and they don't know, nobody knows who Jigsaw is.
No, he's actively wanted by the police. There's an active investigation going on.
And so importantly, at the jelly trap, the flammable jelly trap, they find a pen light that belongs to Dr. Gordon.
Yes.
This has been planted at the site to make it look like Dr. Gordon was there, even though he wasn't. But this is what sparks Detective Tapp's like obsession with it has to be Dr. Gordon, because he thinks they have him. But he has an alibi. He is about to have an affair with I guess an intern, because he's a doctor.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess she's an intern or nurse,
something like that.
Someone who was, beneath him in terms of the
power structure and everything at the hospital. But he's about to have an affair with her, but he ultimately doesn't. And then where Adam comes into play is he has been hired to take photographs of Dr. Gordon.
Yeah, he's like a PI who, he gets photographs of, he says like, rich husbands cheating on their wives for their divorce attorneys or whatever. So that's kind of how they're connected, just a little bit of the threads. Again, to get into like this fully, we'd be here for as long as the movie is, going scene by scene, and we're not going to do that. That's just, it's crazy. You got to go watch it. I don't want to do that because you need to watch this movie.
Yeah, you really do. But so that kind of gives like the basic framework for like why they're here and some of the moving pieces. There are some other characters. There's a guy named Zepp who works at the hospital. He's also been roped into one of the games. He's actually the one who's kidnapped Dr. Gordon's wife and daughter. Yeah,
and that's part of his own game. He's having to do this in order to survive his own game. He's not just doing it just cuz.
Yeah, because, again, Jigsaw's put him through that. He's his own game, like you said. And then, I'm trying to think, there's other, like, pieces that connect to this, right?
Well, I mean, because the whole thing with Tapp is that he thought it was Gordon. He became obsessed with the case. And again, the way that this is all presented, you're not really sure what's happening, like, contemporaneously, what's happening in the past. But we get some backstory as to, like, why Tapp really went off the deep end, which was that he, discovered a clue in looking over, some of the evidence from these previous traps. Yeah. And it leads him to this, kind of workshop that Jigsaw is set up in. And he and his partner, Detective Singh, go to investigate. Yes. Don't tell anybody where they're going, I guess.
For some reason.
And they're right. This is the workshop. Yeah. But it's not as simple as...
No, he has set up another game there for a guy when they have gotten there, and so then they try to ambush him. So he turns that on
as a distraction so that he can get away. Yeah. And in the process, he cuts Tapp's throat, and then he also lures Detective Singh into... this tripwire that triggers a shotgun and kills him. Yeah. Tapp does survive his injuries, but like after this event, he's
like shattered. He's like basically broken. A breakdown.
He lost his partner and he feels responsible. He failed to get Jigsaw. We don't see all the specifics of how he loses his job and everything, but he's basically taking it upon himself. He's like renting like a crazy hole in the wall apartment with
across the street from where Dr. Gordon's,
and he has like the pictures on the wall with the red string.
It's just like a million different newspaper cutouts and red string and stacks of stuff.
And he's gonna solve this thing.
One thing I really want to mention about this movie, it is one of my favorite things, and they keep it up for like all of them just for like aesthetic purposes, I suppose, but like it really shines through in the first one, I think, more than almost any of the other ones. Is just everyone lives in absolute squalor. Yes. In this. I think except for Dr. Gordon's apartment, and that was designed and like decorated by a bachelor.
Yeah, and Dr. Gordon's apartment was so clearly on a soundstage.
Yeah.
Like, it was not... They couldn't even get an apartment or a house. Like, it was not... That's not how apartments are set up. No, it didn't look real. So it looked like fake painted brick that they had in the background.
It's just weird looking. But, like, everyone else's house, Adam's apartment... I know Detective Tapp's thing is, like, a hole-in-the-wall thing. Yeah. But, I mean, like, there's graffiti on on the inside where he is.
Yes.
So like,
and same with Adam.
Yeah.
So it's like he didn't put that there.
No, there's just like graffiti and
he didn't
grunge
even get the landlord special before he moved
on
in.
everything in this movie. It's so funny. There's a scene where Gordon's walking. He says he's leaving from a hospital.
Which later we learn he was actually leaving from a hotel.
Yeah, but either way, he's at like a parking garage, and it's just like a warehouse.
It looks like a barn.
Yeah.
But just like, with cars
just with cars in it. It's so funny.
Yeah. They obviously were doing the best with what they had, but it's really funny to watch. Like they have such a big budget in the later movies because this became so popular that it is a little bit jarring to go back to the beginning and see like how small this is.
Yeah.
In comparison.
It's kind of wild, and it's very interesting because it's relatively simplistic.
Yes.
In terms of what we get into in later Saw movies.
Right.
Like the story is pretty self-contained.
Yeah.
You don't really need a whole lot of
I mean, I understand it's a little bit more complicated because you have, Zepp's game that interacts with Gordon's game and, all this stuff. But at the end of the day, this was two guys in a bathroom.
Yeah.
It wasn't like some of these other ones where it's these high-tech traps that have certain triggers and do this and, suck bone marrow into this tube. And, it wasn't any of that. It was, and they had like, 8 hours?
Some crazy amount of time that they were like actually in there in the bathroom, which is kind of absurd because
versus some of the later movies where it's like you have 20 seconds to behead yourself if you want to live.
Well, I mean, even Amanda's trap in this movie when she gets the thing pulled out, it's like a minute timer or something like that for her to dig through her cellmate's body for a key. But so this is a couple of things I wanted to talk about just briefly to dissuade the people being like he's morally gray or whatever. Mm-hmm. The jelly guy, the jelly trap guy is an insane pick for somebody to go through one of his traps because he says in his reasoning for putting him through this is that he claims to be sick, but he's like up and moving around.
Yeah.
But we don't get into the specifics of what he claims to be sick with. So it kind of sounds like maybe he just called out of work for a little bit. And Jigsaw was like,
at
no. At
worst, he's committing like health insurance fraud. And boo fucking who. Like.
But so he decides to put him through that trap. And like, fine, if you want to say, well, at worst, that seems pretty bad. And he doesn't appreciate being alive for some reason because of that. But Amanda's game is the real kind of linchpin in this whole thing, where she has the reverse bear trap on, and in order to get out, she has to get a key that is within the intestines of her, what is said dead cellmate.
Yeah.
And he's just laying on the ground in front of her, like a question mark has been like painted onto his stomach, and she has a small knife that's next to him. I guess it's like a scalpel, I don't know, to like cut into him with. But just before she goes to do it, he wakes up, so he's not dead. But we find out, because she's the one telling the story to the detectives, that he was overdosed with opium, so he couldn't feel or like sense much of anything going on. So I guess it was like relatively painless for him. Yeah. I don't know.
And we got zero backstory as to why that guy was
just laying on the ground.
Who's that guy and what was his game?
Right.
Because he had no opportunity to survive.
No. So like, if you're being charitable, he went through his own game, and the end result is he was overdosed with opium.
Yeah.
But if you're not, opiates, yes. If you're not being charitable like me, then Jigsaw picked up a guy that she knew,
just put a bunch of drugs in him,
just loaded him up, and was like, "All right, dig through his stomach if you want to live."
Well, which she also does. Like it's kind of unclear in how it's presented that Amanda even realized that he was alive when she was doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could extrapolate that she might have figured it out, but I think it's telling that because Dr. Gordon is overhearing her story.
Yeah.
And it isn't until Detective Singh says, he was alive, that he's like, oh, he was alive? And so, like, if Amanda was the one recounting the story and she didn't say he was alive, it was probably because she didn't know at the time that he was alive.
Yeah.
So it feels buck wild to me that her trap is cut open a cadaver to retrieve an item.
Yeah.
Because it's like, not that I want to live through these traps, but if my trap was cut through a cadaver that can't feel anything and isn't alive anymore.
If they're already dead, yeah, sure.
That's a no-brainer.
That's easy.
I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
So, like, why would he tell her he's dead? You know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It seemed like baby steps compared to what a lot of
the
people
only
go
reason
through.
I think she knew that he was alive, she just didn't mention it in the thing, is, one, we don't know how deep Amanda is at that point. Now, this is supposed to canonically be her first game, so she's probably not in it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with Jigsaw yet at this point. But when she is cutting him open, you can hear the guy moaning and grunting and stuff. And so I know adrenaline and all that stuff is going, so maybe she just didn't notice, doesn't remember, whatever. Right. But it could also be a coping thing that she didn't, you know, say it, because it's a lot harder for her to be like, no, I did kill a guy.
I killed a guy. Yeah, I disemboweled a man.
But anyway, I think that specifically is the one where I'm just like, no, he's like definitely a bad dude, because I don't know what that guy did, but it didn't deserve being drugged up to the point where he couldn't do anything and be cut open.
Well, and like even the first guy, like the guy who has to go through the razor wire trap, his whole thing was that he self-harmed.
Yeah.
And so Jigsaw's like, you don't appreciate life. Now you're going to find out if you have what it takes to live. And it's like, okay, sorry, I didn't realize having fucking depression was a capital offense.
It is to Jigsaw. That's his whole thing. He had depression, but now he's fine because he had a car accident.
Yep. You're getting into stuff that wasn't in the first Saw.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. It's so hard to talk about this without...
Keep it to the first Saw. The one we saw.
Don't worry about it. He didn't have a car accident. You don't know that.
One. I don't even know what you're talking about.
He's just a guy laying in the floor. But yeah, so I mean, to kind of jump, I guess, to the end of this thing, the big twist reveal is that Jigsaw was in the bathroom the whole time.
Yes, there was a dead man in the bathroom halfway between Adam and Dr. Gordon. And when they got their tapes originally that gave them the instructions for the game, Jigsaw says that this guy had a bunch of poison in him. What can you do when you have a bunch of poison in your blood except, shoot yourself? Yep. So he has a clear gunshot wound in the back of his head. He's got a gun. He's got a tape recorder in the other hand. So the whole time this guy has been here, and we've just assumed he was a prior victim.
Yep.
Until the very end of the movie, when he stands up and the little and he rips off his latex special effects makeup. And my favorite part is that Adam, really tries to go for it, because he tries to go for the gun when he
really
up.
Does.
And then Jigsaw's just like, because their chains are somehow electrified or something.
I don't know. It doesn't matter.
To shock them. I don't know what the mechanics of it are, but he just shocks them back.
Yeah.
And he's like, the key for that chain was in the bathtub.
Yeah.
But we know from the first moment of the movie, the first shot of the movie before we see anybody else, is we see a key
on a little light.
On a little light keychain thing resting in the bathtub, and as soon as Lee sits up, it starts draining the tub and it just goes down the tub. So he had no opportunity. He wasn't even conscious and awake when that key went down the drain. So anyone who's like, well, he's still, there was a way out. No, there fucking wasn't.
Yeah.
There wasn't a way out.
Yep. No, it is kind of ridiculous, because he just kind of very nonchalantly says the key to that chain's in the bathtub, and then he goes to to leave, the whole time the coolest theme music in the entire world is playing.
Yep. We're headbanging, we're twerking.
We get the whole recontextualization of every scene.
Everything's coming together.
And then we get the iconic, he turns the lights off, the green light flowing in, you know, backlighting him. Game over. Just closes the door. And it's just black. It's on, you know,
it's over.
Adam screaming in the darkness. Yeah. No.
Yep. We do get some, for anyone who's worried, we do get some more resolution and context to that whole thing later on. Mm-hmm. But we're only talking about Saw 1 today.
Yeah. But Dr. Gordon doesn't get locked in the bathroom. He, at some point during the whole game, they find a couple of hacksaws. Mm-hmm. And at first they try sawing through the chains.
Right, but these are like heavy duty chains.
Yeah, significant chains. And so significant, in fact, that Adam ends up breaking his hacksaw trying to get through it. And Dr. Gordon realizes that the saws are not for the chains. They are so that they will saw through their own feet or legs or whatever. And by the end of this, because things have transpired the way they have, basically they ran out of time because they were talking. They tried to trick.
Yeah, they tried to do a thing where they made it seem like Dr. Gordon killed Adam, but they didn't know about the shock through their so that's how they checked, is they did the buzz to see if he would react, and he did. Yeah. And so they knew that Dr. Gordon hadn't killed him.
Yeah, but so by the end of this, you know, they've run out of time. Zepp's instructions were that if Gordon hadn't killed Adam by 6 o'clock, that he was to kill his Gordon's wife and daughter. So he goes to do that, but then a struggle breaks out because the wife has like managed to get free a little bit. Yeah. And then Tap shows up because he hears gunshots going off, and this starts a whole
the place out.
Yeah, this starts a whole chase scene between Tap and Zepp back to where the bathroom is located. Mm-hmm. We don't ever really learn where that is. It's like underground somewhere, but we have no idea, you know, the context of any of this, which is a theme throughout all of the Saw things.
He always has these weird locations.
But anyway, you know, Zepp goes to do that, but she ends up getting away with the daughter and everything. So then he's like, well, I gotta go kill your husband now. So then that leads to the chase back to the bathroom. So he goes in there, and while this is happening, Gordon loses it because he's on the phone. There was a phone in one of the boxes that he finds, but it can only receive calls, not make calls. And he overhears the struggle.
And he thinks
the worst is happening. He's like, my family needs me. So he snaps, and
he's screaming and crying.
He cuts it. That's when it happens. This is like really the bloodiest. Yeah. Well, no, this is actually not the bloodiest scene. I would say the bloodiest scene is probably when Detective Singh gets killed. Yeah. I would say that's actually bloodier, but it's the second bloodiest scene.
Yeah, they don't really linger a lot on the cutting. They do a lot of, you know, close-up shots of his face, so you can see like his turmoil and his anguish and pain and everything, but we're not seeing a foot get cut off.
Yeah, you never see the bone. He doesn't do what I'm surprised they didn't do, honestly, where he like holds up his stump or just like the foot, you know, out of the shackle or something like that to like really gross people out. They don't do any of that. You don't actually see the foot.
Because he kind of wraps it around.
Yeah, he makes like a tourniquet.
And he's got his shirt over it. Yeah. So.
But he cuts off his foot. He grabs a bullet that was in one of the box things that he got or whatever. And he grabs the revolver that, you know, the dead guy, quote unquote, on the floor is holding. And he shoots Adam.
In the shoulder.
But it, you know, at the time it kind of looks like he just kills him, and then that's when Zepp shows up. And prior to that, Zepp and Tap had a little spat there. Yeah. Tap caught up to him, and they were wrestling. And describing this is a little weird. Zepp's up against the wall, facing the wall, and he's trying to like aim the gun backwards, and Tap is behind him, also trying to struggle with the gun, and Zepp ends up like ducking down at the last second, and then the gun kind of like forcibly goes down, almost upside down, and then goes off, and it shoots Tap, killing him.
Presumed dead.
Presumed dead. And Zepp gets away. He goes to the bathroom, and then he sees that Adam has been killed. He kicks him to check, and then he's still going to kill Gordon anyway, because Zepp's whole thing is he had poison going through his veins.
Yes, he's on a time limit. He needs the antidote.
Yes, so he has to do this. But just as he's going to go do that, Adam gets back up. And takes down Zepp, and then uses the back of a toilet lid to bash his brains in, killing Zepp. And then they have a really heartfelt moment, Gordon and Adam.
I will say, and I had kind of forgotten, I always do forget how at each other's throats Dr. Gordon and Adam are for like the vast majority of the movie. And then after this scene where Adam has killed Zepp, he's been shot in the shoulder, Gordon's missing a foot, and they're like gripping each other, like the back of each other's heads.
It's like a World War I trenches scene.
Yes. It's literally like,
tell her yourself.
You're gonna get out of here, man. Yeah. Don't think like that. And I'm just like, where did this fucking come from?
It's so funny.
This guy was your mortal enemy, Nate, 15 minutes ago. Yeah.
But Gordon's all pale because he's losing a lot of blood, and he's crawling out of the bathroom saying, "I'm gonna come back for you.
Like, I'm gonna get somebody."
And then Adam, this is how we learn Zepp is in his own game and everything, and that he wasn't the one orchestrating this, because up until this moment we think, okay, Zepp is behind all of this, right. And he pulls out a tape recorder that Zepp has on him and plays it. And we learn Zepp's kind of game. And then while he's listening to this, or as it's concluding, that's when Jigsaw gets up. His name's John. He stands up and he's like ripping off this weird latex stuff from his head. And the key to that chain is in the bathtub. Mm-hmm. And it's so good. It's so
it's so good.
The best thing about this movie is it really does start as this like gritty mystery, and it keeps building like that. And then there's the moment with Sing, I think, is a release point where you get like some action and then build up, and then like a big explosive thing kind of happens. A lot of the murder scenes from earlier when the detectives are looking over them are interesting, and like the way they film them is like that very early 2000s, like I'll just give the example that they do in the movie when they're talking about the razor wire thing. They're kind of reenacting it with the guy that's in there, and he's like just thrashing around like rapidly in it.
They do those shots where it's like they simultaneously speed it up, but they also remove frames, so it feels like super choppy, like you're only getting every couple of seconds of it. And so it's very frantic, high energy, and it,
looking back on it now, it's just kind of silly, but like at the time, I understand why.
Because like when you like there was that one scene, they do that same effect pretty consistently throughout the film, and when they did it in Amanda's Trap, it's really interesting because her moment is after she has stood up from the chair and, the timer has come on loose, and she's not even doing anything. She's just like gripping her head and like moving around.
The camera's spinning around her in slow.
And she's just like, oh no.
Just freaking out.
Is not even doing anything.
It's relevant. So funny. But yeah, we get a lot of those moments throughout.
The wife and the daughter survive.
Yeah, the wife and the daughter survive,
which is a rare thing in the land of Jigsaw and
normally like everyone gets killed.
Even the most innocent, they get killed first usually. So
there's very rarely survivors. But we learn about all of the traps at the very end of it and all the games and everything. And then that's kind of it. We don't know what happens to Gordon. He crawls out of the room.
He crawls out, but for all we know, Jigsaw's 10 paces behind him to shoot him in the
just
back
kills
of the
him
head.
or something.
We don't know.
But
we don't really know what happens to Adam. The suggestion is basically that he's just gonna like slowly starve or dehydrate.
That's his tomb.
Yeah, but we don't know.
Yeah,
there might be more to it.
Yep.
But it's it's simple in terms of the traps and the mechanics of the traps. It's complex in terms of like the relationships and
it's very there's a lot of threads that connect to all these things. But kind of what I was saying before was that like the movie is very good in my opinion of building up and building up and building up until you get to the end where you get this release. Because if you think about when Gordon cuts his foot off, right? That's kind of the big climax of it. We're getting reveal after reveal after reveal, then a big, struggle and gunfight between Tap and Zepp, and then a chase really quick. And it's not like a big explosive chase. It's pretty tame as far as a chase goes. But then Tap gets killed, and then Zepp comes in the room, and then Zepp gets killed, and then Gordon's already cut his foot off, and it's just kind of like building and building, and it feels like all of this momentum to get to this big thing, and it actually feels like really good payoff, and then the very ending of it is just game over.
Yeah.
And you don't really get a lot of resolution on a lot of the characters.
I mean, a lot of it's just left up to your interpretation. If they had never made another movie, we would never know.
The wife and daughter survived, but the only way they had to reach Dr. Gordon was through a phone that he could get calls, and he left the phone. He doesn't have the phone on him. He crawled out of the room, and Tap was the one who followed Zepp to this place because he's not a police officer anymore, and he's kind of lost it. At this point, he hasn't told anybody where he's going, so nobody knows where this is. So even though Gordon crawls out of the room, even if you think Jigsaw just walks past him.
Yeah.
I mean,
how would he survive?
Yeah.
Like, yes, I know he tied a tourniquake, but he's already wrapped.
Well, and he says himself he's going to bleed out if he doesn't get help.
And so, I mean, unless there's help on the other side of that door.
There's an ambulance just waiting.
Yeah. Which would, honestly, if Jigsaw did that kind of stuff, I might be okay
I could see it.
I would be like, okay, if there is a full-fledged EMS team on the other side of that door, sure.
It's in the psych ward of a hospital.
Yeah. So you just go right in.
You just immediately
right
go.
Inpatient.
You funneled right through. But yeah, no, it closes and Adam's just screaming and that's it. I mean, that's the movie. And it is kind of just like, there's not a whole lot of resolution, but at the same time, you're like, I'm not mad at it.
Yeah. Well, and I think they were wise to leave it more open because like we've, mentioned, and I don't want to get into it, but in other movies, we continue to go back to this first story. We continue to see more of this that we didn't see originally.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing with Saw in general is that, people always joke about Jigsaw playing the 5D chess and all that stuff. And I mean, that is how these movies are. Like the plot lines get increasingly convoluted. And there's more and more connections and weird plot twists upon plot twists. But again, like to me, that is kind of the fun of it.
It's the charm of the whole thing, right?
It's a popcorn movie where I'm just like hyped to be there.
Yeah. It's just fun. By the time you get to the end and that theme music kicks in, you are so ready for the
fist pumping,
the flashes of all the scenes in the movies that you've seen building up to the moment right now and everything. It's really, really good.
It's really fun.
That isn't to say that it's also not like unintentionally really funny.
Yeah.
They used a lot of actors who are not American and then set them in what is supposed to be like, downtown Jersey, Detroit, something like that.
I think it's Jersey.
And there are times, particularly when like the emotions get really high, that like the accents really start to slip, and you're like, oh boy.
Yeah. I mentioned it when we were watching it, but I still can't get over the fact that Leigh Whannell, his performance in this, he delivered lines like an anime protagonist.
There are certain lines he really does, though.
It sounds like an English dub of an anime, where it's this like very like scrappy, like, oh, now I figured it out. And it's just like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I think what doesn't help with it is that like a lot of the times when he specifically sounds like that, he's not on screen. It's like showing Dr. Gordon and you hear his Adam voice in the back saying something, and he says it in that tone of just like, I've got it.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
So weird. And Cary Elwes, as much as I love him, and I'm not going to say anything bad about him.
No.
I'm just going to say he is British.
He is British.
That's just a fact. And I'm not saying anything else about it.
I kind of wish they had just let them do their normal accents.
Honestly, why not just have this... Well, I did actually read a thing, too, that apparently James Wan and Leigh Whannell had originally... tried to sell this movie to like an Australian production company, and they didn't get any takers, so they redid some stuff and brought it to the US where they thought it would be more readily accepted. So maybe that's why they also wanted to set it in America.
Interesting.
Whereas it may have been set, I don't know, in like their first draft.
Sure.
It might have been set in Australia somewhere.
Who knows?
But yeah, it was funny to hear some of the...
Yeah, towards the end of the movie, it really starts to slip.
Yeah,
out there.
I think the thing, and I know I said I wasn't going to say anything bad about Cary Elwes, and this isn't bad. This is just an observation. his American accent sounds a lot like the transatlantic accent.
Yeah.
Which I think is what makes it sound weird, because it's not even that he's doing a bad job at the transatlantic accent. It's just that we don't really
Nobody
talk like that in the
anymore.
US anymore.
Yeah.
So he kind of has that like old-timiness to his delivery and to the way that he says words that makes me feel like I'm listening to a presidential address from 1928.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I agree. I think it's very funny. I mean, the only person who, not the only person, there are several people in it that are definitely like American.
Oh yeah, I think the majority of the rest of the cast.
But like, you know, Danny Glover doesn't sound out of place.
Yeah.
I do like, one of my other favorite things about this is several of the characters end up doing kind of weird voices just because of like circumstances. You know, after Danny Glover gets his throat slashed, he's, I had you.
Yep.
For the rest until he gets into the gunfight with Zepp, and then he screams, and that's full throated.
Yeah.
He's no longer even trying to do it, and it's he just loses it. And then the iconic Jigsaw voice,
the Batman-esque,
it's so funny. Even Dr. Gordon towards the end of it, he's doing kind of a weird thing. I think particularly Cary Elwes's like accent and stuff really comes out when he's like trying to be sad about things. Then you really hear that like faltering a little bit, and it gives the whole project kind of the feel of almost an indie film.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, like, I don't think it was a big...
No, it wasn't,
it was small, and it could have really gone in any number of directions.
Yeah.
I can see an alternate timeline where Saw didn't get made at all, or if it did, it wasn't going to become this blockbuster franchise. You know, I think the stars really aligned, and I think it's for good reason. Like, I know I've kind of presented my feelings about this as it being, like, vapid, and so it's just like fun to watch, and while that is somewhat valid, you know, I think that there is an element to this of like, it's ridiculous and you just have to accept that, but there also is like, you know, there's a lot of creativity to these films. There is a lot of really strong character development. There's a lot of compelling character work.
Yeah.
There's a whole range of acting, from really, really good performances to very B horror movie performances. Yes. So I can't really even say like, oh, it's all bad acting or whatever.
No.
I think these are well-loved films for a reason.
Yeah.
And yes, some of it is just, it's fun to have these crazy stories and these crazy...
No, it really is.
Everybody loves a villain who's 25 steps ahead. It's so fun.
It really is part of the fun of Saw, is when you get to the end and seeing just like how he planned it all out.
Yes, he knew exactly what you were going to do. Yep. He knows that if he puts up an option where you can go left or right, he knows which way you're going to go.
Yep.
He knows.
And he always knows.
And
he
he's
always will.
Right.
It's very good. It's very fun. Did you have like a scariest moment of this one?
I actually do.
Okay.
I don't think it's a super scary movie personally. Sure. I think it's more like, you know, gross at parts or whatever. But I agree. I genuinely, every time it hits me, there's two scenes that really get me, and they're both the pig. One of the sort of disguise that the person who's kidnapping Gordon and Adam wears is this like disturbing looking pig mask and a trench coat. And the first time we see Pig, it's in one of those like fisheye dome mirrors in the parking garage. Yep. So it's already kind of a weird distorted view. And Pig is getting out of the back seat of Gordon's car and like slow spider crawling across the ground, and it's genuinely so disturbing to look at. Yeah. It's like, if I were to see this in that mirror as I'm trying to get out of a parking garage, I would absolutely full on shit myself. It is like, that would be the most disturbing shit ever. Yeah. And then I love the other pig scene where they do the iconic thing of the only light source is the flash of the camera. That's
my scariest moment of the movie is with Adam. So he's returning to his apartment and trying to develop some of the films that he's taken of Gordon. and he passes out at one point, and then when he wakes back up, like, there's no power in his apartment. He tries to get a flashlight. There's no batteries in it. And so, as you said, the only light source that he has is the flash of a camera. And so he's walking around his apartment because he heard a noise, like a door close, and he's, you know, trying to figure out who's in there, and he's just snapping photos.
Every few seconds, you just get the flash. Yep.
And then one of the times, Pig
jumps out from the closet, and Pig gets you. And it's so
it's genuinely terrifying in that scene.
Hate when movies and video games do this to me, especially video games, because I'm a little baby and I don't want this because I know it's going to be a jump scare. But yeah, anytime they do the every couple of seconds you get the flash, I know I'm about to.
They did that in The Devil in Me.
Yeah.
One of the
remarked
characters
on it at the time where I was like, this is a
freaking
freaking nightmare.
I don't think it was as effective in that one because of the way that the camera angles are, but that's the game. So whatever. But I do agree. I do generally think that specific kind of, like, you can only see for very, like, 2 seconds.
Or like is it the second Last of Us, where they have the mechanic where every so often the flashlight falters and you have to, like, shake it. There's a video game that does that.
Oh, I can't remember what video game that is. I know exactly what you're talking about, though. Yeah. There is one where the mechanic is like it can, like, do
it like goes off, and
I think it might be Last of Us or Last of Us 2.
And like that stuff creeps me out too, because it's just like your
light being your only thing, and
like that is my freaking lifeline. Don't take my lifeline from me.
Very good.
But yeah, I love both those scenes with Pig. I think it's the scariest part of
I think easily. I mean, if you're averse to blood and stuff, then the scariest is probably when he actually cuts his foot off.
Yeah, or just any of the other trap.
Yeah, you know, the part with Sing is also pretty intense, but other than that, I think it's I think if you're just talking about, like, actual somebody's, like, coming to get you kind of horror, that's by far the scariest part of that movie. What about rating it? What do you think?
Oh, you go first.
It's hard.
It's so hard
because I love these movies. It's not a 10. It can't be.
It can't be.
Because there's enough wrong and bad about it that it's not a 10. But this might be controversial. This is like an 8.5 for me.
Okay.
Like real strong. I love putting this movie on. We watched it we just watched it, literally just watched it, and then did this. And then we did a watch through of the entire series last year.
Yep.
Back when they were still, like, in the throes of making, you know, all of the Saw movies. I remember renting or my friend buying all of them up to a certain point and doing watch throughs of every single one of them, and I never ever regretted putting them on.
No.
Particularly the first one.
I've seen them multiple times.
It's just a fun ride the whole way through.
No, these kind of movies I think are really tough for me to rate, because it's almost like you need a different scale, you know, where it's like, is it a 10 movie in terms of all movies that exist? Probably not.
Yeah, right.
Is it a 10 movie in terms of really fun and inventive horror? Yes.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really hard. I was kind of lingering around like a 7.5 or an 8.
Yeah.
My only thing for that, and I love this movie, right? But I do think it does lean a little bit on the ridiculous side.
Sure.
There's certainly some plot holes, especially if you consider this on its own and you don't consider any of the context we get later. There are some things that are kind of frustrating as a viewer of, like, why would those decisions be made? And, you know, I also think that there are Saw movies that are better within the franchise.
Sure.
Which might also be controversial.
I think that is a controversial take, but I don't necessarily disagree with you.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think it's a really good horror movie. It's one that's definitely worth watching and rewatching. Absolutely. But it's not the best.
You were just talking about, like, they're almost like we should have a different scale, and that got me thinking, is like we should develop, like, a scorecard.
A score. Ooh.
So that when we watch them, then we can be like,
it's a 5 in terms of scariness.
Yes, but it's a 10 in terms of fun.
Yes.
You know?
I love that.
And then we can come up with our own thing, and we have a mathematical how we got to that for everything. I think we're gonna do that.
We should work on that.
I think we're gonna try to work on this.
But for now, I'm gonna split the diff.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say it's a 7.75.
7.7555. Repeating.
Bloody stumps out of 10.
Yeah, I didn't say it was
7.75 diarrhea-filled toilets.
Oh no.
That Lee just sticks his whole hand into for some reason without a second thought out of 10.
8.5 Zeps out of 10.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
It's gotta be Zep, man. The theme being called Hello Zep. Ugh.
It's the best. It's the best.
We will be on I'm not kidding, guys. We will be on car rides, and I'll just be like Spotify.
Yep. Just any of those Zep.
Hello, whatever.
Hello,
the final
overture,
Zep.
The final, yep, any of them.
Whatever, I don't care. Just put them on.
We're headbanging. We're rolling the windows down.
When the drums kick in and it gets like all industrial in there. It's
so
great.
I always take notes when we sit down to watch these movies so I can reference back things.
Yeah.
And before I had written anything else for this movie, I just phonetically spelled out dun 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 dun.
It's so good. Yeah, I have no shame. This is one of my favorite movies, horror movies. It's probably, I don't know, man. It's just it's a fun
time.
It's a great movie.
Yeah.
It's on the 100 best horror movies of all time. I think it deserves to be there.
Oh, I think so too.
You know?
I think so too. And I mean, again, this is something we've talked about with other movies as well, but there is something to be said about starting something.
Yeah.
Like, if you are the person who originates something, that there is something very special about that.
Yep.
And even this just being, even if we only consider it in the context of the Saw franchise and not the influence that it's had on the rest of the genre, which it has, but, I mean, it was the start of something special and long-lasting that continues to be relevant and in demand.
Yep.
I mean, they're gonna make a Saw 11.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
No,
I mean, I think even if you look at the trend of the Saw movies, I don't always look at cinema scores for things. I don't necessarily find it to be the most useful in terms of whether or not I'll like a movie, but I just find it interesting sometimes. But the first Saw movie got a C, but then like almost every other movie in the Saw franchise that came after it was like a B- or above. They never got to an A, but that's also really hard for horror movies to get.
Yeah.
But like, my point is I don't think people expected what was going to happen in this when it came out. But then after this movie, every other Saw movie, people knew what they were going into, and they loved it. There's kind of a
formula to it, but it's a magic formula. Yeah,
it's good. They got lightning, and they still got it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that
we've talked enough about it.
If like I could keep going forever about this movie.
I know, but we're already like longer than we normally go. Just because I've got doing it. So
watch the
many
movie. Just watch it.
it.
Close your eyes during the scary parts.
Yeah.
And just watch it.
Just look into Carrie Elwes's baby blue eyes.
Write me an email.
Lost in them.
Write me an email and tell me you're gonna watch it, and then I'll come and like audio description the movie. You can put it on mute, and then I'll just tell you what's happening.
Yeah, and I'll do all the voices.
Yeah,
it's worth watching.
I gotta save my family.
That's exactly what he sounds like. Oh my god, it's like I'm there.
It's like you're there.
Yeah. Carrie Elwes. But we should wrap it up.
Yes.
We do want to let you know that next week's movie is, I can't roll my R's to do a drum roll. Yep, that. It is Wreck.
Yeah.
The found footage zombie movie.
Yeah.
Really excited to watch this one. I love Wreck. So if you haven't seen it, definitely worth a watch.
I am unsure if I've seen it. I think I have, but it was a long time ago. Like, I was still in high school when I saw it. I might have also seen...
There was an American remake of it called Quarantine.
And that might be what I saw, but I can't remember. I described what I saw to you one time, and you said, that sounds right.
Yeah.
but which version of it I saw is up for debate.
Yeah. So we are doing the original one. It is a foreign film.
Yes.
So, it'll be subtitled. I don't know that I've seen the remake, so I can't really speak to whether that one's worth watching.
Sure.
I do think I'm excited that we're going to do some found footage, because that's a subgenre we really haven't touched on so far.
Found footage is cool.
But yeah.
Or it can be cool. I'll say that. I've seen a lot of found footage
There's
movies.
Some duds. But anyway, as a reminder, you can send us an email at firstfrightpod@gmail.com. Feel free to send us your feedback, your suggestions on movies.
Yes.
We're always adding more to our list.
Yep.
You can also follow us on social media. We're on all the major platforms at First Fright Pod. And just to pat my own back, I make little memes for every episode.
Yeah.
And I want likes.
Give her likes.
I need
she does. She basically runs the social media aspect of it, and so she makes the little things for
I make the little memes.
Facebook and
Instagram
and everything. So if you're not seeing those and you want to see them, get on one of those platforms and go look at them. They're funny. Yep. We also recently got it so that there's a Q&A thing on Spotify now for the episode, so you can actually leave I think it asks just what did you think about this episode, but feel free to use that as a review thing and write a little comment or whatever on there to let us know how we're doing. If you don't feel like sending an email,
good, bad, or indifferent, it's all helpful.
Just let us know. And as always, leave a like, comment, or rating on anything that you can. Everything helps.
Yeah, and tell a friend.
Yeah, tell a friend. As always, scare well, and see you next time.
Bye-bye.
That's it for us on this one.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well then, as always, scare you later.
Wrong.
I was so confident.
As always,
a completely different
before.
As always, bye.
As always, no.
As always, I'm your anchor. Jesus Christ. What is wrong with me?
I don't know. You want another try?
I guess.